are the natural translators between two civilizations that coexist on the same planet, but don't always understand each other. And if you're part of this generation, if you recognized yourself somewhere in this story, I want you to hold on to one thing. What you went through was not trivial. It wasn't just a childhood, then modernity. It was a unique experience in the history of humanity, a fork in the road that no one before you had ever lived, and that no one after you will ever live. You are the last analog child, and at the same time, you are a fully digital adult, both at once, and no algorithm can create that. The way you see the world we live in today. Picture a child, 10 years old, a bicycle, a cobblestone street, and nobody who knows exactly where he is. His mother told him to be home before dark. That's his only rule. Between leaving in the morning and coming back at night, he exists in a space that nobody watches, nobody documents, and nobody can interrupt with a notification. He falls, he gets back up, he argues with a friend, he makes up with him, he explores a forest, he invents a game, he gets deeply, profoundly bored, and he finds his own way out of that boredom. This isn't nostalgia. This isn't an idealized image of the past. This is literally what childhood looked like for those born between 1980 and 1985. No texts, no social media, no external validation in the form of likes, just the raw, direct, uncomfortable, and magnificent experience of learning to be human. And here's the first thing this generation possesses that no one else will ever have: a childhood built entirely in the real world. But wait, because the story doesn't end there. It's only just beginning. In the mid-1990s, something changes. Not suddenly, not all at once, gradually, almost imperceptibly. A computer appears in the living room, then an internet connection, slow, noisy, monopolizing the phone line, then a first mobile phone, as big as a brick, with keys that push back under your fingers. The elder millennials are between 15 and 20 years old at this moment, old enough to understand what's happening, young enough to adopt it without resistance. They learn to type with 2 fingers on a keyboard. They create their first email address with a ridiculous username they still cringe at today. They spend hours on MSN Messenger writing messages to people they saw in class just 3 hours ago. And here's something fascinating. Something I want you to hold on to for later. They do all of this without a manual, without a tutorial, without anyone to explain how it works. They fumble, they fail, they try again, and they eventually figure it out. This ability to learn on their own, in discomfort, without a safety net, that's exactly what their analog childhood taught them to do. The bridge between 2 worlds is right there, and they cross it without even realizing it. But there's something nobody really talks about when it comes to this transition. Something important. It wasn't a smooth evolution. It was a rupture. In the span of 5 to 10 years, everything that had structured their lives was redefined. The way to communicate, to get information, to entertain themselves, to work, to remember, to exist socially, everything. And they had to adapt in real time, with no historical precedent, no model to follow, no older generation to tell them how to get through it. Their parents couldn't guide them, because their parents had never lived through anything like it. Their children would never have this problem, because their children would be born on the other side. The elder millennials crossed this rupture alone, caught exactly in the middle. And here, I need you to sit with a question. What does it do to a person to grow up in one world and then have to mentally rebuild all of their references in a completely different one? I'm going to answer that. But first, we need to talk about what this transition actually cost. There's a silent pain in this generation that nobody really names. Boomers have their narrative of war, of rebuilding, of sacrifice. Gen X has its cultivated cynicism, its claimed disillusionment. Younger millennials and Gen Z grew up with digital tools as a natural extension of themselves. But elder millennials are stuck between two narratives that don't fully belong to them. They're too young to truly be boomers, too old to truly be digital natives. When they talk about calling from a payphone or looking up information in a paper encyclopedia, younger people look at them like they're telling a legend. And yet, those same elder millennials know how to code, swipe, stream, work remotely, manage 10 apps at once, and adapt to every new software update without barely blinking. This isn't a performance, it's survival. And that survival has forged something rare, resilience. That word gets thrown around everywhere today, often incorrectly, often as an empty slogan. But for this generation, it has a concrete meaning, almost a physical one. When you've learned to be bored without complaining, you know how to wait. When you've learned to solve a problem without Google, you know how to think. When you've learned to communicate face to face before learning to do it through a screen, you know how to read a room, feel tension, recognize an emotion on someone's face. These skills aren't learned in an app. They can't be downloaded. They're built through thousands of small moments of discomfort, silence, and imperfection. And the elder millennials built them, then layered on top the entire power of the digital world. It's like someone who learned to swim in the ocean, then was trained to pilot a boat. They understand water in a way that someone born in the cockpit never will. And they pilot the boat just as well as anyone else. That's exactly the unique advantage of this generation. Now, I want to talk about something that goes beyond this generation specifically, because this is where it gets truly important. What the elder millennials experienced will never happen again. Never. No future generation will live through such a total, abrupt, and complete transition between an analog world and a digital one, because the analog world, payphones, paper encyclopedias, evenings without a screen in hand, no longer exists as the dominant way of life. Children born today arrive in a world already wired, already connected, already algorithmic. They won't have to cross the bridge because they're born on the other side. What that means is that the deep understanding of both worlds, this dual reading of reality that the elder millennials possess, is a non-renewable resource, like a species whose habitat has disappeared, like a craftsman whose trade no longer exists, like a language whose last native speakers are aging. This generation is literally the last to have been human in that particular way. And maybe that's why their view of today's world is different. When an elder millennial sees a child who can't be bored for 30 seconds without a screen, they don't judge. They understand, because they remember what boredom felt like. And they also know what the digital world can offer. When they see a company resisting digital transformation, they understand that too, because they remember the world before, and they know that change is destabilizing even when it's necessary.